Last week, the woke mob descended on our state capital to celebrate the Boise Pride Festival. But what Idaho taxpayers likely didn't know is their tax dollars are being used to support this event in the larger context of the leftist culture war. The city of Boise residents in particular got to see their city's logo plastered all over the event. Though this sounds like an Ada County problem, all Idahoans should be concerned. On this week's episode of Fiscal Fridays, we will dive into how your tax dollars are going to support events like this and why it matters for the Gem State. So how are your tax dollars being used to support initiatives like the Boise Pride Festival? And where are your lawmakers in all of this? Shouldn't they be representing your voice? Finally, does this affect the Gem State going forward? Are we going to become just like our neighbors to the west, or worse, the failed state of California? The answers to all of these questions boil down to a key point. Idaho's bureaucracy is working against the legislature and the people to sustain leftism until it has a foothold in the Gem State. This must be stopped, and fast. Let us start by looking at how your government supported the festivities last weekend. Plastered all over the event were sponsorships from the city of Boise. The city has yet to respond to IFF's public records request detailing exactly how much was spent on the event, but the festival's website notes that the Boise city was an orange grade sponsor, meaning that they had to give at least $18,000 to the organization. Another orange sponsor was the Idaho Harm Reduction Project. You've heard of this group before in other products from IFF. This group provides free needles, drug paraphernalia, sex worker outreach, condoms, HIV testing, and other services on the taxpayer's dime. This group is a nonprofit, but the community sure doesn't believe in the work that they're doing. Less than 1.5% of their budget is funded by monetary donations. But don't you worry, the government sure believes in their cause. The grants distributed from the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare cover 95% of the Harm Reduction Project's budget, a total price tag of $1.7 million in the 2022 fiscal year. This effectively makes the Idaho Harm Reduction Project an off-the-books government organization. Another IDHW program that was notably absent this year was Project Filter, a program to give away free smoking cessation supplies. Last year, the state had to withdraw their $20,000 Project Filter sponsorship to the event because of the political fallout associated with the festival hosting a drag show featuring child performers. In addition to all this, we pointed out in last week's episode that the state is subsidizing Micron's workforce training program in the amount of $15 million. Supposedly, this would free up some more disposable funds for things like the Boise Pride sponsorships, which have a cost of at least $30,000, and funding the University of Idaho's Director of Diversity, part of a $1 million investment at the University of Idaho. Now that we have some context, where do our lawmakers fit into all this? Are they doing anything to stop the abuse of our tax dollars? Actually, the legislature did a great work in their attempts to curb the funding streams for these woke projects. The legislature rejected $19 million in so-called opioid response grants to first responders instead of harm reduction programs. This should have ended state-subsidized lawbreaking that enables harm rather than reducing it. After all, the statute that permits the existence of the needle exchange programs, like this one, makes no mention that it must be funded. Despite the best efforts of the legislature, the Idaho Harm Reduction Project carries on. The IDHW failed to take the hint from the legislature and just repurposed another grant to support these activities. This is yet another example of how the department has no regard for the accountability to the legislative branch. Worse yet, the governor even allows it. A similar program is seen with the IDHW direct sponsorships through programs like Project Filter. Though their support was pulled from Boise Pride Festival last year, the agency still racked up more than $16,000 in sponsorships at other Pride events throughout the state. In response, the legislature was able to pull most of the advertising budget from Project Filter and stipulated that they were not to use the state funds for such purposes. So, is this still happening, you ask? Well, the short answer is we don't know. Software issues plaguing the state are preventing anyone, really, from being able to view the state financial information for this fiscal year. But that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother Fiscal Fridays episode. So how does all this affect Idahoans? In short, we see some great work by the legislature to curb this inappropriate use of taxpayer dollars. But the problem is systemic. The bureaucracy is too big to rein in just one fiscal year with no policy moves. The IDHW plans to just wait out the storm until the next election when many new legislators simply don't know better than to just keep an eye on them. This means two key things for Idahoans. First, it is becoming very apparent as of late that you don't have a voice in what is supposed to be representative government. Idaho is no better than the swamp in Washington, D.C., where the legislative branch is viewed as a rubber stamp for the objectives of the permanent establishment. Your voice is growing silent with every dollar we spend to make state agencies larger, and it must be stopped. The second piece to this is leftist government is breeding more leftist government. Tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars are spent on programs that aren't even called for in Idaho code. The agency simply saw a federal funding opportunity, asked for money, took it, then created a program with no legislative direction. This has negative effects on our culture too. As we expand the welfare state, guarantee people will be dependent on illicit substances, and promote social deviance, we are destined to experience the same fate as Portland, Seattle, or even California. Many new Idahoans left these places because their policies fail the people and degrade our once free and independent society. In closing, your taxes are working against you, and the legislature is having an increasingly difficult time getting the problem under control. The solution needs to focus on controlling the rogue bureaucracy and actively working to shrink the size of government. Make no mistake, the same policies that destroyed other states are already here. We must root them out before it is too late. For more episodes of Fiscal Fridays or other great content from the Idaho Freedom Foundation, please visit idahofreedom.org.